Welcome to Electronic Specifier Insights, the podcast for electronics engineers. I'm your host, Paige West. In today's episode, I speak with Ellie Carey, elected trustee at Engineers Without Borders UK, and Ava Fernandez, strategic sustainability consultant at Ramboll, about the 2025 Systems Change Lab. The Systems Change Lab is a dynamic, action-driven community dedicated to reshaping engineering education and practice. In 2025, changemakers will come together to transform ideas into outcomes that drive real impact to define the role of engineering in society. I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get started. I'm pleased today to be joined by Ellie Carey, who is the elected trustee at Engineers Without Borders UK, and Ava Fernandez, who is the strategic sustainability consultant at Ramboll. So thank you both very much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you. But before we get started on the topic of conversation, let's take some time to introduce both of you. So Ellie, why don't you start and tell us a bit about your background and tell us about sort of your role at Engineers Without Borders?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Paige. And firstly, it's great to be here. So I'm Ellie. I am now the member-elected trustee, one of the member-elected trustees at Engineers Without Borders UK. But before that, I did work as a member of staff as innovation coordinator at EWB. My background is mechanical engineering. So I did a master's in engineering and was involved with Engineers Without Borders throughout my whole time at university, getting involved with the chapters. So through their committee, so I was president of the chapter, got involved in lots of their initiatives, and then became a strategy champion, so supporting the student chapters at other universities throughout my final years of uni. And then they couldn't get rid of me, and then I became a member of staff as innovation coordinator. So I was supporting the Systems Change Lab as their project lead, and then now I've left, but I am still supporting as a trustee. So that's me.
Fantastic. And we've covered Engineers Without Borders before, but perhaps for those of our listeners who aren't quite familiar, can you just summarise what it is that the organisation does?
Yeah, of course. So Engineers Without Borders is a charity who are focused on making engineering serve people and planet in the best way possible. So we're aiming to embed global responsibility into engineering education, but also into engineering practice. So we're looking at things like sustainability, ethics, inclusivity, and we do this through a variety of programs to inspire, to upskill. So we have educational programs such as the Engineering for People Design Challenge, but we also do that through advocacy and driving change. So things like the Systems Change Lab, which we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Ava, let's come on to you. Can you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself and the company?
Yeah, of course. So it's very nice to be here as well. I'm very excited. So my name is Ava and I work with Ramboll. As you mentioned before, I'm a consultant. So I've started working with EWB. It's going to be a bit shorter than Ellie's story this year. And we've been collaborating on the phase 2, phase 2025 of the Systems Change Lab. A little bit of my background, if you want, but I studied political science in undergraduate, so I'm completely from another side of the academia kind of aspect landscape. And then I did business, but I've worked a lot with charity organizations, so that's where my interest in EWB's mission comes from. And I'm part of Ramboll, which is itself a global engineering company. So that's where also the interest comes from. And we are kind of very focused and big partners in promoting sustainable change throughout different industries. We're located in more than 16 locations in the UK. We have 1,400 experts across the UK as well. And we cover things like engineering, as I just mentioned, architecture and consulting. And it's all about sustainable transition. So that's where we really meet EWB's mission statement.
Excellent. Thank you very much both for those introductions. So if our listeners haven't guessed already, we're going to be chatting about the Systems Change Lab during this episode. So Ellie, let's come back to you. Can you give us some more information on what the Systems Change Lab is and what inspired its creation?
Yeah, of course. So the Systems Change Lab is ultimately a collaborative program that is trying to bring together educators, students, industry professionals, professional institutions, all with the aim and the focus of driving positive systemic change within engineering. And what do I mean by that is what we recognize is that the engineering sector isn't fit for the challenges that we have in the future. So the climate crisis and the ever-pressing challenges that we are facing. And we recognize that in order to address these needs, the engineering sector as a whole needs a shake-up and a massive systemic shift and a change of focus on how it runs. So the Systems Change Lab is trying to keep pace of the scale of the challenges that we're facing and find the root of the problems with the profession and see how we can target what's taught, what's valued, what's rewarded within the sector, and shift towards creating a positive change and how we can make this sector better.
Excellent. I'm interested to hear, because you guys have been running the lab for a few years now. So what have you learned from sort of the 2023-2024 edition, and how has that sort of informed the iteration for this year?
Great question. I think first thing we've learned is that there's an incredible energy for change, and that people are really lack the space and the structure and the support to act on that. So the lab is a really brilliant place where we bring together educated industry professionals who wouldn't normally interact to be able to share their thoughts and their fears and how they would like to change the sector. So firstly, there's an incredible energy for change. But in the 2023-24 Systems Change Lab, so phase one, we primarily focused on engineering education. So we brought together 200 change makers from 25 universities and 22 companies, all committed to trying to embed global responsibility within engineering education. So we looked at key challenges such as the lack of integration of sustainability and ethics in the engineering curricula. So the fact that the majority of universities, sustainability was seen as an add-on, bolt-on addition to education rather than it being integral and integrated within the education that students were getting. And we also saw that there's a gap within corporate strategies of how they would like to embed sustainability and then how this was being embedded in practices day to day. So we really came together to try and tackle these issues intentionally and address or identify what the problem that needs to be addressed is.
Mm-hmm. And in your opinion, why is systemic change in engineering education and practice so urgent right now?
Because over 50 to 60% of UK engineering degrees don't yet fully integrate sustainability, ethics, and inclusivity as core principles within their engineering degrees. The climate crisis is happening now, and it will be happening in 10, 20, 30 years. So the students that we're educating now are the students that are going to be not only living, but also working and addressing the problems that we're going to be facing in 10, 20, 30 years. So it's really important that we are equipping the students of today for the problems that we're facing now, but the problems we're going to be facing tomorrow. And the only way we're going to create that is a systemic change, and a systemic change that happens sector-wide, globally.
Well, you've convinced me with that answer.
Well, that's good. We've got one person.
Okay, so the lab emphasizes climate breakdown, social inequality, and unsustainable resource use. How are these challenges currently overlooked in traditional engineering education?
Good question. Traditionally, I think sustainability is seen as an add-on, an optional add-on that can be addressed if there's time, if there's space within the curriculum, or it's seen as sustainability might be something you do as a master's or you do as an optional unit and you choose to do it as a student, but it's not seen as something that can be embedded into everything. Looking at global responsibility, and if we look at global responsibility as defining that as meeting the needs of people and planet, that's not just sustainability. I'm using quotations here. That's ensuring that we're meeting the needs of people and planet. So this is in everything we do. It's not just within engineering, it's within philosophy, humanities, history. It's important that we integrate sustainability within as an integral part of everything we learn. And I think in traditional education, it's seen as something that can be added on, or it's something that's nice to have and not something that we should be having and is a requirement to have.
Yeah, very good point. And I know one of the focus areas at the lab is roles and values of engineers. So in what ways does that need to change in particular?
traditionally, I think, and I think it is changing, is that an engineer is a purely technical role. Engineers are problem solvers. They like maths, they like physics. It is traditionally a male-dominated sector. And with that, there's specific stereotypes that come with that. And I think more and more that is being challenged. We're seeing a more diverse range of people studying engineering, but we're also seeing a more diverse range of what an engineering education is, not only looking at apprenticeships, but also in terms of the range of engineering degrees that are available. But I still think there's more that can be done to challenge the role of an engineer, and more that can be done to challenge the role of not just an engineering student, but what it means to be an engineer in practice. And what we're trying to do at the lab is give people space to discuss that and to discuss what the challenges that people face within their daily life practicing engineering, and recognize that we want systems thinkers. We want people to think about equality, ethics, sustainability. We want people to have a holistic view of what engineering is, because that's what life is and that's what the challenges we face are. And we need to recognize value in having engineers that have those well-rounded viewpoints on life and aren't just necessarily the traditional technical problem solvers that engineers are seen to be.
Okay, so following on from that then, Ava, let's come to you. Could you describe for me Ramboll's role in the lab and what strategic support you're providing?
Okay, yeah, of course. This is a great question. So Ramboll is a foundation-led company, and so pro bono activities are part of our core identity, and we're really excited about taking part in these activities. And so one of these pro bono activities is working with EWB on the 2025 Systems Change Lab through the Flourish program that we have at Ramboll. So I can talk about my own experience working with EWB and the Systems Change Lab. And I'm currently collaborating with a colleague called Freya. And we are essentially providing program management experience and strategic support to EWB on different aspects of the lab. So far, we've helped on the organization of events, the facilitation of events. We're also here to support the creation, the conceptualization, the vision of the lab, and to bring any expertise that we might have outside of the EWB mission.
Excellent. And following up for that as well, I'm intrigued. What drew Ramboll to partner with EWB on this initiative?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, Ramboll is definitely committed to sustainable change through architecture, engineering, and consulting, which are all services that we provide. And so it was a great fit with the Systems Change Lab mission and the goal to drive systemic change in the engineering landscape and space. It's been quite fun and very rewarding for us to be part of this mission, and we're just part of a team that's so driven and engaged. So it's a great way to figure out how Ramboll can also contribute to pushing, this entire movement even further as an engineering company.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so opening up the floor again, Ellie, if you want to come back in. What does involvement in the lab look like for professionals or students?
Great question. And this is one that we've worked really hard at to try and make the lab as accessible to people who have wildly busy schedules in the day-to-day. And I'd say the best way that people can get involved is to join a task and finish group. So the task and finish groups are groups that are working towards specific goals within the lab, and they're trying to track progress and make sure that we get tangible outcomes out of the Systems Change Lab this year. Getting involved in a task and finish group can look in a variety of ways, from high engagement, where you are coming to all task and finish group meetings, all the lab get-togethers, and trying to actively drive the progress of them. Or you can have more of an ad hoc involvement where you can just come to the events that you want to or the events you're available to. There's a mix of online and in-person events. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible to get involved today.
On my side, really what I've understood and what we're really pushing for the lab is to be as flexible as possible, to involve as many people as possible. We really want this space to be inclusive and to be maybe comprising even people that are not necessarily part of conversations usually. And that's how I think, and I hope we think that the lab could be a radical space by just being, being conceptualized on this whole idea of being inclusive of people that might not necessarily be part of the conversations already.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, Ava, you're completely right. If you are interested in getting involved in the lab, I would go on the Engineers Without Borders website and look at the Systems Change Lab. What we've got on there is details of the task and finish groups, and you can go and have a look at them, look at the topics, and look at what we're trying to work on, and see if any spark your interest, spark you wanting to get involved and have your say and try and contribute to some tangible change. And if you do, come along and see what they're about.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll certainly encourage our listeners to
Yeah.
Okay, a forward-thinking question now, probably for both of you. I'm interested to hear, Ellie, maybe we'll start with you. What kind of tangible outcomes are you hoping to see from this year's lab?
Great question. The question everyone asks and wants to know. Firstly, I think I want to see stronger networks built across the sector. So networks between industry professionals and academia to see how we can make bonds there and try and support engineering education to be more applicable to practice. I also want to see stronger relationships between the professional institutions and practice and academia so that they're not necessarily just seen as something far away, and we want them to feel like they're relevant to the now and how people are working within the sector. And then secondly, I would like to see some clear problem statements identified with clear action plans. So we've been through the discover phase, discovering what change we might want to create within the sector, and we're moving into the define phase. So trying to define what clear problem statements we can identify as manageable tasks to try and create change. We're not going to create huge systemic change all in one go. So we're trying to make bite-sized manageable tasks that we can tick off and have little wins before we have big wins.
I like the sound of that. Ava, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ellie's answer. I think that covers the main points. I think so far we are encouraging the task and finish groups to kind of imagine anything that they want. We're really in the define phase right now, so it's all about exactly pinpointing what you think might be missing so far in the engineering landscape and how you could kind of, answer to that underserved need per se. So I think in terms of practical outputs, we're really looking to anything actually, like it could take the shape of exactly what Ellie was saying, a community, or it could be a practical, like an actual tangible output. We're really excited about seeing what the task and finish groups are going to bring forward, because that's also, I think, one of the main components of this entire exercise is really pushing people as part of their task and finish groups to shape the change that they want to see in the engineering landscape. So we're actually having an event in a week that will definitely reach that objective, I hope. And yes, I think it's all about basically feeling like we've had that first impulse and that kind of plan to go forward and to move forward and to bring change bits by bits, as Ellie mentioned, because a whole system is not changed, from a day to another. And then I think one thing that is worth highlighting is that this phase of the Systems Change Lab was not thought as starting and finish, but actually if there are ideas worth exploring later on, or if people are really interested in something and want to pursue it in 2026 or later on, they're really welcome to. So we're really thinking about this as the first kind of push, and then we hope that this will really kind of get the ball rolling and get amazing solutions out and amazing output out.
You've said that so well, Ava. I would say the Systems Change Lab is part of Engineers Without Borders UK's Drive Change strategy. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a momentum and a movement towards driving change within engineering. And that's not going to happen overnight. So we're starting this journey. We're starting to define what we're identifying as problems, and see what we can tackle first and what there's an appetite for. The most important thing, I think, within the Systems Change Lab is that it's participant driven and participant led. And what that does mean and does culminate in is a bit of unknown at the moment. We don't necessarily know what the outcomes are going to be, but the aim here is to build a strong network of people who really care about driving change towards a globally responsible engineering sector and trying to improve engineering education as much as we feasibly can and ensure that practice is also reflected that way. So whilst it might seem a little bit hazy at the moment, I think what we're trying to do is embrace that and roll with it, because I think what will come out of that will be not what we expect, but hopefully what people feel is needed.
Definitely.
Well, it certainly sounds like the possibilities are endless, and both of you have really inspired me during this episode. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the future brings and what the outcomes of the lab are. And Ellie, as you mentioned earlier, I would definitely encourage our listeners to head over to the EWB website and check out how you can get involved and how you can support this great work. So Ellie, Ava, thank you both very much for joining me on my episode today. It's been a pleasure to host both of you, and I wish the lab all the success in the world, and we'll have to bring you back next year to see how you guys get on.
Yeah, to see what the outcomes are. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this latest episode of Electronic Specifier Insights. Don't forget to subscribe to the series to keep up to date with our newest guests, and do share with fellow colleagues, friends and family who may be interested in the latest news from the electronics industry.